Welcome back to the show. Brian Haenchen, Jason Andera, Chad Stadem here with you, ready to get into the full swing of the season. How you boys doing?
Great.
I'm good. Well. It's a little warm out, and for the players who played last week, that was definitely a factor. I mean, I was thinking about COVID and all these precautions, and I remember taking those extra water breaks, and the heat was such a huge factor with the way things started out last week. And it sounds like this Friday is going to be a little nicer, but we'll see.
Yeah, I mean, last Friday, I remember some coaching friends sent out. They said, "Hey, with the COVID thing, don't forget about heat. Because you get focused in on one thing, and you forget sometimes that heat's a major factor too. Yeah. So you need to take care of that."
It was a little sticky. It was a little sticky. Chad, let's start with your game since you might have to leave a little early today. You saw Sioux Valley open up their season. What were your impressions of the Cossacks?
Very talented. They had the classic first start of the season where there's a little. It wasn't running real well, but once the game got going, basically after about 12 minutes or so in the game, then they started going. And they started hitting all cylinders, and they looked good. They're very talented. They're young. They've got a lot. They're very diverse in their offense, and their defense played well. So, yeah, they're a team that I think in 11B they'll be right in the top four there, like we kind of predicted last week. I was really impressed with Coach Hughes and how they were doing things.
I watched a few of their highlights, and they passed the ball a little bit. I mean, there were only 11 passes in the game, but Parker Pitts, I think I looked at his stats, was 9 of 11, and I think he hooked up for 3 touchdowns. So. And they had a couple deep balls that they threw, too. So I was surprised to see that aspect of their game. I thought they were just going to be ground and pound.
No, Parker is a good quarterback. He started last year as a sophomore, and he's a big body, strong-armed kid. And, they hit him with some vertical routes. And, he's capable of doing a little bit more than just throwing a vertical route. But, he has some good receivers, too, to throw to.
Mm-hmm. Jandy, you were at bottom last week. They lost to Platte Geddes. Platte Geddes looked pretty good. What were your impressions of that game?
That game started late, too, so Platte Geddes already a little bit flustered with everything going on. They get to the field late. They ended up starting the game a little bit late, and they got off to a rough start, too. And I think that was a theme throughout 9-man 11B is some of these really good schools, Viborg Hurley, Wolsey-Westington, Sioux Valley, Platte Geddes, they all got off to really rough starts, but they got it going once they found Jackson Newman in the backfield, about 150 yards rushing. He had a really good day. And they passed the eyeball test. You get off the bus, and these guys – they've been committed to the weight room. They look big. They looked like Bonham usually looks, and Bonham's much younger this year. They're missing their best player, so they kind of just couldn't get things. They had time of possession one in the first half, but second half they just ran out of energy.
I was at Howard last week. They mercy ruled Castlewood. Howard's going to be really good this year. It's hard to get a gauge, obviously, when you're playing a team like that. A little bit of a mismatch there with Castlewood replacing so many guys from last year, but Howard looked really good. They have a good quarterback. They have a stable of running backs, and per usual with Rumble, some big linemen, and they're going to be able to move the ball pretty efficiently this year. They're going to be a fun team to watch. It seemed like in week 0, the overriding message was be grateful for this opportunity, even more so than years past, and just savor every moment because there's just so much uncertainty. Like COVID, at least for me, it wasn't at the front of mind, but it was certainly there, if that makes sense, in that after the game, it's like, okay, guys, get your stuff, get out of here. We need to just do whatever we can. He did a great job. Now just make sure we keep it going so we can keep this season going. What was your guys' impression for the games you were at?
Yeah, I mean, you can see that they were trying to make precautions where I was at, and I do think that they are saying, like, hey, let's take advantage of the moment we have because we all know, like, we're living in a world right now that everything can change in a minute because of COVID. We don't know what direction we're going to go in. So last game that I was at, even the volleyball game last night, Washington, I was working at, it was very evident. Everybody had masks on last night, and everybody, it was great. Everyone kept social distance. After the end of the game, everyone cleared out. And I think we all are aware, like, we really want to compete, and I think it was evident in the weekend games that I was at and last night.
And don't get tired of doing this stuff. This stuff matters.
Yeah.
This stuff matters so much as we get more and more used to the new normal. I don't want people to fall into the non-social distancing. Yes, there's going to be some hiccups along the way, but just keep doing what you're doing, guys. You guys are doing a great job. And I think you're right. People have so much more perspective than usual. And I've seen some tweets from players in Minnesota like, hey, you guys are lucky. You guys get to play. We don't right now. So I think they have a different level of appreciation, like you said.
Absolutely. As we prepare for this first week of games, Chad, normally this is when you would be getting your team ready. What does this week look like for a coach at AAA?
I think at all levels too. like last week, we talked about how all the 11-man and 9-man schools that played last week, there's rough starts. This is going to be the same way here on this level. That actually takes a couple weeks to get through. Just getting through the continuity, false starts, little things like that. But the biggest thing is finding out who we are as a team. As coaches, we always come in like, okay, this is what I think we should be. But you generally will figure it out. Week 4, 5, 6, 7, you'll start figuring out who we really are and what we're really good at. What we need to focus in. And so coaches see this more as a test. That's the way I always told kids. I always said every game's a test and see how if we accomplish the goals for the test, and we'll build off that. And so this first week is more about getting to know who we are, and obviously new coaches, like, they come in, they don't know what defense or offense they're going to face, so that they're always trying to. They have a wide spectrum of things that they have to cover. And sometimes you can get caught in that, but hopefully you can focus on a few goals and get good at it.
Was that like that for you, just sort of like the growing pains shaking off some of the rest? Was it like that for you when you had some veteran teams coming back, like when you were in the run of there, when you were getting all those state championships? Was it the same way, or were you able to start a little faster?
Yeah, to some point, like sometimes that's a tough area to get into, because if you have a very veteran team, you can think, okay, I can open up a playbook, I can get really dynamic if I want to. But what I found through my experiences with my most veteran teams, I didn't have to. I could really focus less. In the more inexperienced teams, I had to open up a little bit more. So, that's a double-edged sword you get into as a coach, and you try to keep things as simple as much as you possibly can. But, getting into that first game, there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of you got to feel each other out, see where we good at, and that's where coaches and players kind of, the most experienced teams, you can usually get through that much quicker. The learning curve is much shorter than it is an inexperienced team, and the inexperienced team might take you a number of weeks. An experienced team, you might get through it in half, and you might be knowing where you're at.
That's a good point. I never thought about that, about focusing in, because you have to have 11 players all on the same page, and they can get there quicker if they've done it before. So when you're running a play that they can't stop, you run that play.
Yeah, and generally when you're really good teams, you don't, like most coaches who've had a lot of good teams will know, like, my playbook's smaller because we can execute so much better. Yeah. And we get big plays. I don't need to be as creative as I have with my inexperienced teams, because now I got to get new wrinkles to get the ball moving, things like that. And so, but sometimes I've also had a bigger playbook with my most experienced teams as well. But you could just do a little bit more than you normally could.
Cool. Sure. Jandy, what are you expecting to see Friday night?
Friday night,
just overall.
Overall, yeah, I'm expecting. Again, the weather is always an issue. It looks like it's going to be in the 80s, so I think that's going to help. But it is a preseason game, even for these big schools, and especially for the schools that we're going to talk about in a little bit, who have a young quarterback. This Brandon Roosevelt game, we're talking about two quarterbacks who will probably be sophomores, and it just you got to get the big game atmosphere. The other thing I'm expecting is there going to be a big game atmosphere in these crowds? I mean, are people, they're going to allow a certain amount, but are people going to take advantage of that? Are you going to get a big, home field advantage or not so much? So, and then, I look at games here these first 2 weeks, and you don't even use them later in the year as far as when you're doing your comps and your comparisons, because everything changes so much. But it'll help us get a roadmap of who's got what and who needs to change and who needs to make adjustments.
You mentioned the fan standpoint and the atmosphere. I feel like having the students there and allowing students, at least at the Sioux Falls schools in Harrisburg and Brandon Valley, allowing all the students in, that should hopefully help cultivate that atmosphere a little bit, make it more fun, feel more like a traditional Friday night.
Yeah, and you want to have it about the kids. Really it comes down to about the kids having fun, being with their friends, and having a good experience. And having the students there will really help the athletes on the football field and the other court and volleyball and all that, so that they can feel like it's a normalcy, it's a normal game in that respect.
Let's start with 11 AAA and work our way down this time. Let's start on Saturday, specifically with that Brandon Valley Roosevelt game. I think that's kind of the game of the week. Chad, I'll let you go first with your analysis and thoughts on that one.
I feel it will be a very interesting game, because they both come in ranked 1 and 2, and obviously well-established programs, and they both will come out with new quarterbacks, like you guys said. And so I'll be interesting to see how they'll adapt to their quarterbacks and their capabilities. So the playbooks maybe won't be as open, but it might be different than what you've seen in the past. So that'll be interesting, how they'll incorporate their offenses, defenses as well. I'm assuming BV will have a more experienced defense. They're bringing back some good defensive guys, and I think they have less to worry about in terms of the learning curve in that respect. We talked a little bit about Roosevelt's up front, front linemen. They will see what happens there as well, but they do have a good defensive backfield, and so the defenses I think will probably be ahead of the curve maybe a little bit, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see some new wrinkles on both sides of the offense.
Does that, when you're going up against a young quarterback like that, does that allow you defensively to throw in some different wrinkles, try some more advanced stuff to try and get that kid off his game a little bit?
Yeah, and sometimes the best defenses don't have to blitz. They can just stay standard, and they can kind of just get back in their zones and try to take advantage of passing lanes. And so that can cause some young quarterbacks, because a lot of times as coaches, you try to simplify and maybe give a 1-2 progression read for a young quarterback. And then, so defensively, if you can just take away that first read, a lot of times, it's going to cause some problems with a young quarterback. And so you might see them try and just take away the immediate quick threat that they recognize defensively and try to get that quarterback running.
Jandy, you expecting to see a heavy dose of Tate Johnson on the ground for Brandon?
Yeah, on the ground, and we talked about it a little bit last week. I think they're going to create opportunities for him in the passing game as well. They're going to get him into the offense. He's a guy that's not scathed if he's going to be used 30 times a game. I don't think they want to do that, but I think they can do that. Their offensive line, though, I'm going to be watching up front. I think the offensive line at Brandon Valley, they always have good lines, but this year it might take those first 2 or 3 games before they get some cohesion up there, whereas Roosevelt's got 4 guys coming back on their offensive line, so I would expect the blocking to be a little better on the Roosevelt side, which means I think the offense on the Roosevelt side will have an easier time scoring. Not to say, there's going to be big plays in the game that negate that, but it looks to me like Roosevelt's more ready for this than Brandon Valley, but that's why they play the games.
Harrisburg, Rapid City Central, Sioux Falls, Lincoln, Watertown also playing on Saturday, and that brings up another point, Chad, that I wanted to ask you about, and that's what differences are there when you're playing a Saturday game versus a Friday game? Is it a big change to the routine?
I think for the Sioux Falls schools, right now, with us only having one day Thursday and one day on Friday, it's not going to really change the routine as much. As a coach, I like to have school and then the football game. But Saturdays, it won't be as big of a deal. I think the only worry is you hope the kids are, not sleeping till noon, and and they're actually eating right and hydrating right before the game, and you can kind of get them locked in. But I like having school, so the kids are focused. They're sharp. They know the routine. I like routine. But Saturday games are also great because they can become a showcase as well, and then so people can take their time, get into the games and in the past and enjoy that. So, but it's going to be a big Saturday. I think you're going to see a lot of good football from high school football because there's no college games, so the only show in town is going to be a lot of the high school games.
On Friday night, you have O'Gorman hosting Rapid City Stevens, Washington versus Aberdeen Central. Jandy, any thoughts on either of those matchups?
So Washington, Aberdeen Central, I think Washington is going to come out with some fire in that game. People ask me, how good is Aberdeen Central? And honestly, they've gotten better the last couple of years. They've got some big guys up front. Carter Hogue was injured a little bit last year, but he's going to be a full go this year. Everybody talks about Reese Burkhardt just because he's a D1 athlete, but he is a difference maker on defense, and I've seen him make some catches in traffic too. He's a really talented tight end. So they've got some things going for him. It's not going to be a cakewalk for Washington, but I just really like what Washington brings to the table as far as skilled positions, improved line. Kendis Ledbetter, you told us about him last week, and I watched him a little bit more. He looks like a really good defensive player that the rest of the state probably doesn't know about yet. So just more talent on that Washington team. I think they should win that game.
Chad, your thoughts on those two?
It'd be interesting to see what Aberdeen comes down with. They did play a lot of seniors last year as well, so what they've come down with will be interesting. And again, like Washington, like we talked about, obviously I lived through it. We played a lot of young guys last year, and this year we're bigger. They're bigger. They're going to have 3 guys over 300 pounds, and they're going to have the other 2 guys aren't small either. They're in the 270, 280 range. So I mean, they're going to be very heavy up front, and I could see them just running away with the football and just getting really, really physical with it up front because they can do that. The interesting will be the defensive aspect. I think they bring back a lot of talent on the defensive side. They're going to be Washington's going to be much faster. I think, like I said before, maybe the best 4 linebackers as a group in the state. And then the D-line will be much improved. So it'll be interesting to watch the first few games of Washington, see how they've developed they do have the talent. It's there. So to compete at a high level with the other Sioux Falls schools and Metro Conference opponents.
And the other game you mentioned, that Harrisburg Rapid City Central game, I don't know much. It's Rapid City Central, right?
Yep.
Yeah, Rapid City Central. I don't know a lot about them. I haven't exchanged information yet with Coach, but I do know they have Cole Meisman back there, and I know that they're going to be running a different offense this year. Harrisburg, on the other hand, just a ton of good athletes on that team, and I can't wait to see if Jacob Knuth really takes that step up to be a premier quarterback in the state this year, having that show totally under his belt.
I'm really interested to see, too, on Friday night how Rapid City Stevens looks against O'Gorman. And then for O'Gorman, on the flip side, they're going to be without Connor Pavelko for the first few games of the season. They seem like a team that maybe takes some lumps early on because they have a pretty difficult schedule stacked in there. But then by the end of the year, just in popping a fashion, they're starting to find their stride, and suddenly they're right in the thick of things in terms of, championship conversations.
Really, to me, Roosevelt is the most talent-complete team right now, and everybody else, I could see any of those teams making a push as the season goes on. Brandon and O'Gorman and Washington, even Lincoln, who's lost such a big, important senior class. I mean, you still got Tommy Thompson and some really good receivers on that team, and Isaiah Robinson. They'll need to rebuild some other stuff. But anyway, my point being is there's a big chunk of AAA teams that could make a run this year.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we always said you don't need to be good until end of October. That was always our mantra that we always said. So we never focused in on wins and losses early in the year. And like you said, the first 3 games is just finding out who you are.
Almost preseason.
Yeah, in that aspect. And then the last part of the season is where you want to be, the last 3 games, and that's who you are, and that's where this is what we're going to do. This is how we're going to do it. And usually, like we said, the last 5 years has been the same 4 teams in the Final Four. And generally, that comes down to the coaches doing a nice job getting their kids prepared to be at the top end.
In 11 AA, there's one game that jumps out, and that's Brookings Huron, the returning runner-ups under a new head coach. Huron, they return their linemen. They have their quarterback back. They're one of those teams that, on the other side of Pierre, they're certainly in contention there.
Honestly, I think Brookings got a lot of votes just because of what they did last year, but they're nothing like they were last year. Where Huron, I think, can take that next step with a lot of the same guys. So, Huron to me looks like they should be able to take care of business here. But first week of the season, like you said, like everybody's saying, I mean, who knows what's going to happen.
11A has an interesting offering of games. One of them is Canton T area in a rematch of last year's semifinals. That'll be a really good game.
I think Canton's going to be just as fine. I mean, obviously, losing some couple key players from last year, but I think they're going to be just fine. And then T obviously is, the last number of years here, it just seems like they just keep finding the guys and they keep replacing, they just keep moving. And Coach Claiborne always has those guys ready to play. So that's going to be an interesting matchup, even though how close they are to T and Canton. So there's kind of that rivalry going on. And so I'm excited to kind of see how they turn out of that. I'm also really excited for Del Rapids Lennox. That'd be another good one as well. That's tomorrow on Friday night.
Yeah, 11A's got some good matchups. I mean, including the 2 you talked about. Dakota Valley plays Madison. I think it's West Central and Custer. There's a lot of good teams that are going to be going at it. And as far as getting back to Canton and T area, I think people have dismissed Canton. I talked to some of their players. Zach Richardson said there's going to be a lot of guys you haven't heard of. And just because they were waiting behind Caden Burley, we're ready to go. Xander Elling, one of those guys, he's going to be a really good running back for them. And they've got a 3rd-year quarterback, and they've got a lot back, I think 8 starters back on defense, something like that, 7 or 8 starters back on defense. I think Canton is got the tools, but these could be the 2 top teams in 11A by the time it's said and done.
I wanted to ask this last week, but I neglected to because I'm horrible. If you had to pick your 2 finalists in that class, who would you go with? I mean, that's the one that I struggled with last night writing a story. I couldn't nail that.
I think Del Rapids. I voted them number 1, and that's why, because I think they're dynamic on both sides of the ball, and I think they're really sore from last year's quarterfinal loss because they had a really special season up until then. I really think they'll progress as the year goes on. I think the other teams, I mean, I like West Central. I like Canton. I can't put a name on that.
Yeah, and I kind of see them similar to AAA. There's at least 5 or 6 teams that can, if things go right, they can be there at the very end. Like West Central is going to bring back a lot of big body guys, and Coach Benedetto is going to be in the 2nd year, so things are going to start going there. Obviously, Dells is very, very talented. and then we got T and you know Canton and Madison.
Madison.
Madison could bring in someone too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I mean, this class could literally come down to who stays the healthiest and who can mature the fastest and hang on at the end. And so it'll be an interesting class to follow along.
Who'd you have?
I have a story going up today. I just
Okay.
went with Del Rapids and Sioux Falls Christian.
Sioux Falls
Sioux Falls
Christian, we haven't
Christian's
talked about.
yeah, they're an interesting case. They got Mitch Walker back. They have some other big dudes back. Jared Smith's really excited about this group and just seeing them, out there on media day. They're big guys. Unfortunately, we won't get to see them this week with Pine Ridge calling off fall sports, but they're one of those teams that may not get noticed right away. But I think they're going to be pretty good here under year 2.
He's spoken.
Yeah, I agree with you. And again, class 11A, we already talked about 5-6 teams that could literally, get right up to peck their way up to the top. So it'll be an interesting class.
Absolutely. Down in 11B, the game that I'm really interested to see unfold is Bridgewater Emory Ethan versus Elk Point Jefferson. Bridgewater Emory Ethan, obviously, they're just consistent. They're always there at the top. Elk Point Jefferson is kind of rising up. They have Drake Peed back. They have some other guys back, including another All-State player. They're a dangerous team there in 11B, and it's just kind of an interesting early season test to see how that goes.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting the way both those teams started out last week, too. Bridgewater Emory Ethan picked up right where they left off against Wagner, and Elk Point Jefferson, they were in a game for a while, but they pulled away just fine, too. So I think those are going to be two of the stronger teams in 11B. And it's weird when you see the changing of the guards. Games like this will give Elk Point Jefferson a huge confidence boost if they can play even right alongside BEE or find a way to beat them. Then all of a sudden you're starting to talk about them as an upper echelon team.
Yeah, and we talked about Elk Point last week with Sioux Valley, and then Winter,
Yeah.
St. Thomas More, Bridgewater. Again, another tough class. McCook came out and played a really
Yeah.
good game, and so again, 11B, like it is every year, always has tough, good teams in it, and the competitors are always right there at the end. And again, we've got 5 teams, and there's probably gonna be a 6 or 7 team yet in 11B that's going to step up. But I'm really interested to see this Bridgewater and Elk Point game, and to see where they both stack up against each other.
You mentioned McCook. Jacoby Krause had a huge game in his debut.
43 carries, 376 yards, folks. And we knew, and I talked to Ryan Evans a little bit because he's from McCook. He used to coach those guys just a couple years ago, and he said they're going to go far if Jacoby Krause can lead them. And he was dead dog tired and still ran the ball 43 times and just took over the game in the second half.
Winter versus St. Thomas More is another game from out west worth keeping an eye on. Maybe Winter looks really good. St. Thomas More, it'll be interesting to see how they're able to reload after graduating a good senior class from last year. I know the game didn't go great last year for them, but it'll be interesting to see how they stack up here early on.
Yeah, I think Winter's, there's a reason people are voting them number one across the state because, and there's another team that got off to a slow start. They were down early against Stanley County and then came back and got into the groove, got some turnovers. Their defense set up their offense. They had short fields to work with, and they always feature 3 or 4 guys that can run. Last week it was Sam Kruger who got the job done, I think 150 yards or something like that in a touchdown. So I look for them to go out to St. Thomas More, and I think they're going to show the state they should be the number 1 team.
Dropping down to the 9-man ranks, a couple of games jump out, one of them being Canastota Freeman at DeSmet, defending champs going against, again,
Very exciting.
that DeSmet team that's kind of on the upswing. They're starting to buy in. They're chopping at the bit here to get their program turned around, and this could be a big step forward for them this season.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of DeSmet, another team that started out a little slow against Clark Willow Lake last week, and that was the theme for me. All these teams starting out slow, but then they caught fire. They got a pick 6. Kalen Gary, we know him for basketball, but he scored a receiving, a rushing, and a pick 6 touchdown. A lot of young players, and they really dominated. Again, the time of possession was all DeSmet in the second half, even though I think they allowed 22 to Clark Willow Lake or something like that. So they're going to have to play better defense against Canastota Freeman if they want to be in that game.
Yeah, and Canastota, obviously, I think they proved they're right on top.
Yeah,
And we
they didn't get off to a slow start.
No, I mean they took it right to it. So, and again, Coach Strand will have those guys ready this week, and they'll play. It'll be a fun game for them. A nice, tough matchup right away early.
Absolutely. 9AA, you have number 3 duel at number 5 Hamlin. I think Vibrant, Hurley, Lemon, McIntosh are maybe just a cut, a little bit of a cut above, but I mean, there's a lot of really good teams still hidden within their classification.
Yeah, Viborg Hurley, Corsica Stickney stunned them at first, and then they came back and scored their traditional 40-some points, and Cody Kessler, I believe, got in for a couple scores, so it was good to see them getting some supporting cast, getting some extra guys in the end zone. But then you talk about Lemon McIntosh, and they dominated, but they they didn't really have a tough competition this week. They're the same way. They have, I believe it's Newell, and they shouldn't have a problem there. FYI, for all you Lemon McIntosh fans, I'm going to have Cody Thompson, their quarterback, on my show later tonight. So check me out on Twitter or somewhere, and I'll let you know how you can see that. But
Seamless.
But yeah, 9AA, 9AA is to me it's really a Viborg Hurley class. And then I got to watch Platte Geddes, and I think they barely passed the ball. Their passing game was not on, and they still looked like they can physically beat most 9AA teams, so they'll be good too.
As we wrap things up here, trying to keep the show a little tighter. Chad, you going to be checking out a game this weekend?
Yeah, I'll be at Washington and Aberdeen Central on Friday, and then we might sneak out to the Saturday game too and see how that pans out. But yeah, we'll watch games and see where everyone fits in AAA this year.
You going to be at Brandon on Saturday? Is that what you're hinting at?
I don't know. Maybe Brandon, and we'll see. We'll figure it out. Maybe I can go harass the quarterback coach over at Brandon and taunt him a little bit, But otherwise, no. Yeah, I'm excited to see the Washington kids. I know Coach Evans is really excited. He's, they want to play, but I'm concerned about with the conditioning over the summer, seeing how all the teams pan out, because they were the conditioning was different than years past. Usually you would have track that would help really get the guys really conditioned and ready to go into the summer, and we didn't have that. And so I really like to see where teams are fitting with their speed and conditioning.
Yeah, that's a good point. Track does keep you in shape, and then you just roll right into football. There was a little gap there. That's a good point. Plus, all these teams are different. They're all coming at it with a little different attitudes. So, I will be at that game on Saturday to watch Chad's brothers coach the quarterbacks. And for all you Midco subscribers out there, we're going to be having that game on live. You can find a friend that has Midco. If you don't, if you cut the cord, that's fine. Go to a bar somewhere. Watch the game. Tom, Neiman, and I will be on the call. And Friday night's our first night of Varsity Sports Live, where we're going to have wrap-ups from several games across the whole state, and hopefully get player and coach reaction, which is the most fun part of the show.
Absolutely. So our coverage plan for the Argus, Matt Zimmer will be checking out Aberdeen Central Washington and then Watertown Lincoln, so he'll just be living in Hardwood Field for a couple nights. Trent Singer will be checking out Tierra Canton, then I'll be at Rapid City, Stevens O'Gorman, and Roosevelt Brandon Valley. We'll have scores, live streams, the whole deal at argusleader.com. And yeah, we're set. We're ready to go. We're excited about it. Don't know how many more of these we're going to get, but
do
we're
you do
going.
pep talk still? Maybe we need like a pep talk at the beginning.
No,
Coach Stadem.
If my players said you did pep talks, they know they're like, he doesn't do pep talks. And Thursday night is when I usually give my talk, and then Friday is like, let's go play. So my guys never came out of the tunnel roaring.
Okay.
If you're not ready to play by Thursday, Friday, you shouldn't have to, no one should have to tell you. You should just
it's the
open
same
the
for the
cage and let 'em
show.
go.
Same for the show. If you're not ready by Wednesday,
That's
like,
right.
Get off the show.
Yeah, so no, I'm not a rah-rah guy, so I'm just...
Jandy's our rah-rah guy.
Yeah,
He's our
Jay's going to
energy
be
guy.
our rah-rah guy.
Yeah, you should ask my softball. I coach softball, by the way. You should ask my softball team if I give pep talks. They would laugh at you too. So,
That's amazing.
I try to get them to laugh right before they go on the
I
field.
love it. Next week we'll have President's Bowl to discuss. Hopefully Chad will be back with us for that as well. It'll probably be the same three of us, same time, same place. We thank you all so much for watching. Be safe out there, and we'll talk to you again soon.